Sports Bash, if you missed our conversation with Sal Palantonio from Sal Pal Friday, check that out on our YouTube channel. Coming up, Casey Joyner goes one thought on every NFL game this week. You watched the game last night and say, man, how cool is it to have a receiver that can catch the ball?
It's amazing.
It's amazing how much better that makes the quarterback.
2004, I think, was the last time we watched that around here.
You know, Sal followed up with an email to me. He said the subject line was shut down the West Coast scouting operation. And he, again, went to J.J. Arthego-Whiteside and D.K. Metcalf 7 picks later. And the numbers there, I didn't need to see those numbers. It just hurts, man. So what's the vibe in Seattle? The Seahawks are in town. It's now a pick'em. It's interesting. They opened up as a 3-point underdog. This is an 8-2 team. A lot of close games out there. Every game except for one has been a one-score game. John Clayton, 710 ESPN, joins us now to give us a little bit more insight on this Seattle team, the vibe of that team in Seattle, and what they think of this Eagles team coming in. John, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Am I following Sal Pal? If that's the case, I am so honored.
Well, he was on last hour, so, I mean, if you throw it back
that's close enough.
Yeah.
I mean, he's such a good friend.
We got great insight today from both Sal and you, and I'm interested to see in Seattle. I mean, we're so far apart to get the vibe. Like, here, people look at this Seattle team like this is a game the Eagles have no shot to win. What's the vibe of the Seattle fans entering all the way, going across the country and playing this Eagles team?
Well, I mean, they feel like they've just dodged a bullet just about week in and week out because, like San Francisco, although this is all changing how these next 3 weeks for both teams, they've had relatively easy schedule, not really playing many teams with winning records. But, what's happened is that their defense is not anywhere close to anything that we've seen in the last couple of years. It's not as good. And the big reason is the lack of pass rush. Now, last week against San Francisco in the Monday night game, that was the first time this year they actually had a 4-man pass rush because Jadeveon Clowney has been an absolute steal coming over in the trade from Houston, but nobody else has been able to get any sacks. And so they went through the first 9 games with only 15 sacks and a limited number of pressures on the quarterback unless it was Clowney making the pressures. So then what happened last week is that, after a 6-game suspension and 3 games trying to get back into football, Jaron Reed started to come on at the defensive tackle position. Now, nobody knows who he is, but he's a guy that was a former second-round pick who had 10.5 sacks last year on the working with Frank Clark. And so he got the inside pass rush going, and it got Al Woods, another defensive tackle, to get into motion. Poona Ford, who's a short but stout defensive tackle. So they finally got a 4-man pass rush, and for the first time they were able to drop 7 guys into coverage and cover some of the lanes that get open. Because what's happened is the lack of pass rush has caused them to blitz more, which really isn't their pattern. The other thing that changed was that they got Quandre Diggs in a trade from the Detroit Lions. Now, remember, he was a team captain, a Pro Bowl alternate last year, and he gives them not anywhere close to what they had in Earl Thomas, but he gives them the Earl Thomas type of look because, he's a good hitter. He's got good range and good speed. So really, if you saw the team that rushed the quarterback last week, that's the good team. What you haven't seen for 9 games is the good defense. What's covered everything up has been Russell Wilson. 5 fourth-quarter comebacks and victories, and he's playing at the MVP type of level.
Interestingly enough, we were just talking about this before you jumped on, is when I watch Seattle, I say, man, this defense is just clearly not the same. They played very well in the game against the 49ers, but this Eagle offense has been awful. So do you feel like that the Seahawks defense can gain some momentum playing against this Eagle offense?
You would think so because, again, they finally started to come on. Everybody thought, because remember, what's happened is that they've totally redone their defensive line in 1 year. They traded Frank Clark, and the reason they did that is that, they didn't want to pay the $20.8 million a year for him, but they also needed to do it because they only had 4 draft choices. And so getting a first and a second from Kansas City gave them the ability to maneuver and get a good draft with 11 draft choices. Then they started to scramble to figure out what to do for pass rushers. First, they tried Ziggy Ansah. He's coming off a bad shoulder surgery, and he's still coming off the bad shoulder surgery. He's not been a factor whatsoever, even though he was a franchise pass rusher Pro Bowler in Detroit. He's 258 right now, where he needs to be 270. He can't lift enough to get the extra weight on, so he's been a non-factor and is kind of being phased out. Clowney has done great. But then it's taken everybody else time to get up to speed on the defensive line. Because remember, Reed was on the 6-game suspension. So redoing the defensive line was the holdup. But everybody thought by week 7 or week 8, the pass rush was going to start. Now, again, if the start was last week against San Francisco, good. If not, then they're troubled.
John, what's the expectation for Josh Gordon in this game? Obviously, he only got a few snaps, but they were very, very valuable 2 weeks ago when they played. What about this game against the Eagles?
There's great expectation because he's come in and fit in very well. And even yesterday, Russell Wilson was praising what they see from him. And what it comes down to is that he can be the third receiver because Tyler Lockett, again, a lot of people know about him, has played at a Pro Bowl level. He now has taken over fully as the number 1 receiver and is playing like a number 1 receiver. And he dodged a bullet last week because he suffered what could have been a compartment syndrome injury that could have knocked him out for the season and jeopardized his career. He's going to play this week. So that's huge because Russell has such a good throwing relationship with him. Then DK Metcalf has been, if not the best, one of the best rookie wide receivers. Well, Gordon comes in, 6'3", 225 pounds, caught 2 slant passes, still shows some speed, and now gives them a legitimate starter on the other side. And so they feel good about the 3-receiver set right now, even more so than they did a couple weeks ago.
So does he play 50 to 55% of the snaps, if not more, or is that still a little too much for his time there?
I'd say right now probably 40 because the anticipation was going to be about 15 in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's had an extra week with the bye week to be here and fill. And it seems like he's picked up just about everything. I know talking to him after the game, he said that no, it wasn't too complicated in the transition. And again, I mean, we'll stay off the field problems that he's had. But I mean, think about the football problems he's had. He goes from just about every bad quarterback in Cleveland to Tom Brady and Russell Wilson in 1 year. You talk about being saved as a player. That's not bad.
John, you look at the Seahawks, and historically with Pete Carroll, they have been a run-first team. Now, as they travel to Philadelphia, the Eagles, one of their bright spots this season has been their run defense. So when you look at that matchup and what the Seahawks really want to do strategy-wise to win this game, is that the number 1 area that you're looking at, or does that play into the hands of the Eagles a little bit?
Well, not to because what happens now is that in the second year in Brian Schottenheimer's offense and the fact that Russell Wilson, totally buys into the offense, their plan is to run first. And, Chris Carson's, probably the best back in yards after contact in the league, and they usually get him 20 carries a game. But they've also, when they face good run-stopping teams, what they've done is they have adjusted, and they'll throw some shorter passes. And, because normally what they do is they like to run on first down, second down, and try to set up easy third down plays. But they realize, they did it a couple weeks ago against Baltimore. That wasn't going to work because Baltimore has 2 good run stoppers on the defensive tackle spot. So they ran to the perimeters, but they also worked the short passes. They did the same thing against Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh came in with a good run, with a run blitzing scheme. And so my guess would be they're probably going to try to work on the secondary and mix it up a little bit more and pass a little bit more. Again, they're a 3-receiver team working mostly out of shotgun, but as much as they want to run, they probably will try to pass more. And then also, too, you've got for the third game, Joey Hunt, a shorter type of center who's actually pretty good, filling in for the injured Justin Britt. And so, with Fletcher Cox there and now him starting to come on, I think they want to try to minimize some of the trouble that he could have.
John Clayton, 710 ESPN. Do the Seattle fans believe in this Seahawks team, or are they skeptical? Are they kind of looking at this 8-2 and saying, man, a lot of close games, some wins again? They beat the Bengals by a point. They had a tough one against Tampa. Are the people buying in out there to the Seahawks team?
Not completely. I think that they have that worry now because of the defense and the problems the defense had because they're not used to that. They're used to having a defense that's going to give up 18, 19 points a game, not a defense that's going to give up 24, 25 points a game. So there's a little bit of skepticism, and how it is on the talk show. It's like if they come off a loss, it's like a total disaster. The difference is they've only had 2 losses, and I don't think anybody in this city anticipated an 8-2 record, this late into the season. And so I guess, but still, like anything else, it's like they worry about the defense because they're so used to having great defenses.
Also, the fact that this team is undefeated on the road. I mean, this is a team that even in their Super Bowl years, you would say, Seattle's typically a different team out of Seattle. Any vibe, explanation or anything why they've been so successful? Now, this game was a night game originally. Is that something that because they've done well at 1 o'clock on the East?
Oh, yeah, they really have. I mean, they've been the best football team since Russell Wilson's come here and Pete Carroll's come here at the 1 o'clock Eastern start. I mean, what are they, 4-0 so far this year in those games, or 3-0?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I think that they're 17-12 since Russell Wilson came here, and it's just Pete Carroll and his ability to prep the team and get them to not worry about the early start. Because last year, I think, and really in the last 2 years, they didn't have any early starts. I mean, there was only a Tennessee game 2 years ago. Last year, they were able to avoid it because they got a flex that helped them out. But this year, everything's going, and there was some thought that next December 15th, their game against Carolina, which is an early start, will go to late because of scheduling. But Carolina may be out of it by then. But no, Pete just does a great job of preparing. They always go in 2 days early. He just seems to have that knack of trying to avoid that usual problem when a West Coast team comes east and plays early, is getting off to that totally slow start.
John Clayton, now I know 3-point was the spread. The Eagles were a favorite in this game. So the people over here were like, wait a second, Seattle's just flat out better. Now it has kind of shifted to pick 'em, but I see your colleague Jim Moore out there at 17 ESPN. He is picking the Eagles to win the game. Are most people out there feeling the same way, that Seattle will come across the country and come up unsuccessful against Philly on Sunday?
I think a lot of them are, because they thought the same thing in the San Francisco game. But then, what you can see is that they can be down now by 10 points and look like they're going to get blown out. And the next thing you know, Russell Wilson's rallying the team and getting them back to a point where they have a chance to win. Again, so much of this is Russell Wilson, because with the 5 fourth quarter comeback victories, his ability to just be patient. And again, everybody knew this was going to be his best season, because you could see it from the very first OTA. He did different type of training where it looked like he worked on his core muscles in the stomach to help him be better in throwing the ball a little bit harder, and he has a good, strong arm, but also throwing it longer and being more accurate. And so, you could see from the first practice that this was going to be his best season, and then he's developed a great relationship with the team, and part of that can be the fact that he turned into a real good business person, in the sense that he said, listen, if I don't have my contract done and an extension before a certain date, and he didn't want to wait like the last time to training camp, I'm not signing it. And so they worked it out, so he got the $35 million a year. He's then had so much time extra to work with his receivers, taking them to Mexico, taking them to L.A., working with them closely, and developing a relationship that makes pretty much every receiver better because of what Russell Wilson's able to do.
He's John Clayton, 710 ESPN Seattle, at John Clayton NFL, and he was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline with some more insight on the Seattle Seahawks. Thank you, John.
Thank you.